They said I was too plain for their family wedding and tried to throw me out in front of everyone. My husband just stood there, embarrassed. His family had no clue who I really was. But when that private jet landed in the parking lot, everything changed forever. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden wealth and family drama, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because you won't believe how this wedding turned from a nightmare into the most satisfying moment of my life. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. My name is Angela, and I need to tell you about the day that changed everything. It was supposed to be a beautiful celebration, my sister-in-law Sophie's wedding. Instead, it became the day my husband's family tried to humiliate me in the worst possible way. What they didn't know was that I had been hiding something from them for years, something that would turn their world upside down. The morning started perfectly. I woke up early, carefully pressed my cream-colored dress. Nothing fancy, just something I picked up from a department store. I wanted to look nice for Sophie's big day, but I also wanted to stay true to myself. You see, I've always believed that simplicity is beautiful. I don't need designer labels or expensive jewelry to feel confident. At least, that's what I told myself as I looked in the mirror that morning. Jake, my husband of 3 years, was already nervous. He kept adjusting his tie and checking his phone. "You look lovely, honey," he said, but I could hear something else in his voice. Worry, maybe? I should have paid more attention to that tone. We arrived at the venue, this gorgeous country club that probably cost more than most people's cars. The parking lot was filled with luxury vehicles, and I suddenly felt very aware of our modest sedan. But I pushed those feelings aside. This wasn't about money or status. This was about family, about celebrating love. The moment we walked through those doors, I knew something was wrong. Margaret, Jake's mother, took one look at me and her smile froze. She quickly whispered something to Charles, Jake's father, and his expression darkened. Other family members started whispering too, stealing glances in my direction. Margaret approached us with that fake smile wealthy women perfect over decades of social events. "Angela, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "you look comfortable." The way she said comfortable made it sound like a disease. Charles joined us, looking me up and down like I was something that had crawled out from under a rock. "Is this really appropriate for such an elegant affair?" he asked Jake, not even addressing me directly. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, but Jake just stood there, fidgeting with his cufflinks. "She looks fine, Mom," he mumbled, but there was no conviction in his voice, no strength. In that moment, I realized my husband was more concerned about his family's approval than defending his wife. Margaret took my arm and steered me away from the crowd. "Sweetheart," she said, her grip surprisingly firm, "I think you might be more comfortable at home. You look like you're coming down with something, very pale." I wasn't pale from sickness, I was pale from anger. "I'm perfectly fine, Margaret. I wouldn't miss Sophie's wedding for anything." "Well," Charles interrupted, joining our little circle, "perhaps you didn't understand the dress code. This is a high society affair. The photographer will be taking pictures for the society pages." The implications were clear. I was an embarrassment. My simple dress, my lack of jewelry, my regular department store shoes, none of it met their standards. I wasn't good enough for their family photos. Other relatives started gathering around, and I could feel their judgment like a physical weight. Jake's Aunt Linda made a comment about maintaining appearances, while his cousin Mark wondered aloud if I understood the significance of the occasion. The worst part? Jake said nothing. My husband, the man who promised to love and protect me, just stood there looking mortified, not by his family's behavior, but by me, by his wife. The ceremony was about to begin, and I found myself seated in the very back row, as far from the family as possible. Margaret had orchestrated this, claiming the front rows were reserved for immediate family only. I watched as distant cousins and family friends took seats closer to the altar than the bride's sister-in-law. During the ceremony, Margaret kept turning around to look at me, shaking her head slightly. At one point, she actually got up and walked back to where I was sitting. "Angela," she whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "you really don't look well. Perhaps you should step outside for some fresh air." I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to remove me from the ceremony entirely. In front of everyone, she was suggesting that I was too sick, too inappropriate, too embarrassing to witness this family milestone. "I'm staying," I said firmly, my voice carrying more strength than I felt inside. The bride, Sophie, caught wind of what was happening. Instead of defending me, she approached with concern in her eyes, not for me, but for the disruption I might cause. "Maybe Mom's right, Angela. You do look a bit flushed. We wouldn't want you to feel worse." Even Sophie wanted me gone. The bride herself was asking me to leave her wedding because I was somehow not good enough to be there. The reception was even worse. As the photographer called for family photos, I was systematically excluded from every single shot. "Just immediate family," Margaret kept saying. "Just the wedding party. Just the extended relatives." There was always a reason why I didn't belong in the frame. I watched from the sidelines as they took picture after picture, capturing memories I would never be part of. Jake participated in every photo, never once asking where his wife was or why I wasn't included. The conversations I overheard cut deep. "Poor Jake," someone said. "He could have done so much better." Another voice added, "She's so ordinary. What does he see in her?" Charles was the worst of all, telling anyone who would listen about how disappointed he was that his son had married down. They talked about my poor family background, my lack of social connections, my obvious inability to fit into their world. Every word was designed to make me feel small, unwanted, out of place. I excused myself and stepped outside, needing fresh air and a moment to collect myself. The parking lot was quiet except for the valets moving cars around. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. "Dad," I said when the familiar voice answered. "Angela?" "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" I could barely get the words out without crying. "I think it's time they knew who I really am." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back to the simple life you wanted." "I'm sure, Dad. It's time they knew." You see, there's something I haven't told you yet. Something I had hidden from Jake's family since the day we met. My father, Harrison Stone, is one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country. Our family wealth isn't just substantial, it's the kind of money that makes headlines. But when I met Jake in college, I made a conscious choice to live simply, to see if someone could love me for who I was, not what I had. I had walked away from trust funds, luxury cars, designer clothes, and a lifestyle most people only dream about. I wanted to build something real with Jake, something based on love rather than money. For 3 years, I had lived as a regular person, working a normal job, driving a regular car, wearing regular clothes. I thought I had found true love. But watching my husband's family humiliate me, seeing Jake do nothing to defend me, I realized that maybe it was time to stop hiding who I really was. 30 minutes after that phone call, I heard the unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors overhead. The wedding guests started looking up, confused by the noise. Cars began pulling into the parking lot. Not just any cars, but a convoy of black SUVs with tinted windows. I walked back into the reception just as my father entered, flanked by his usual security detail and personal assistants. Harrison Stone doesn't go anywhere quietly. At 62, he still commands every room he enters. His presence is magnetic, powerful, and impossible to ignore. The entire reception fell silent. Margaret and Charles looked terrified, probably thinking they were about to be robbed or arrested. Jake looked confused, not recognizing the man who had just taken control of his sister's wedding reception. My father's eyes found mine across the room, and he smiled that warm, familiar smile that had comforted me through childhood's scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. "There's my beautiful daughter," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. The gasps were audible. Margaret actually dropped her champagne glass. My father approached with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about what anyone thinks of you. He kissed my cheek and then turned to address the room. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but my daughter called and said she needed her family. Charles found his voice first, stammering, "I'm sorry, who exactly are you?" My father extended his hand with a polite smile. "Harrison Stone, Angela's father." The recognition was immediate. Charles's face went white. Margaret looked like she might faint. Even Sophie stopped mid-conversation to stare at us. "I understand there's been some confusion about my daughter's suitability for your family events," my father continued, his tone pleasant but with an edge that made everyone in the room pay attention. "I thought it might be helpful to clear that up." Jake finally approached, looking stunned. "Angela, I don't understand. Your father is Harrison Stone? The Harrison Stone?" I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. "I wanted to live simply, Jake. I wanted to know that you loved me for who I am, not what my family has. But your family has made it very clear that who I am isn't good enough for them." Margaret rushed over, her entire demeanor transformed. Suddenly she was all smiles and warm embraces. "Angela, darling, why didn't you tell us? We had no idea. Of course your family, of course you belong here." The hypocrisy was stunning. 20 minutes earlier, this same woman had been trying to throw me out of the wedding. Now she was treating me like royalty because she knew about my father's bank account. Charles was equally pathetic, suddenly interested in every word I had to say, asking about my thoughts on the tech industry and whether I might be interested in investment opportunities. But I had learned something important about these people, and I wasn't going to let them forget it. I addressed the room, my voice steady and clear. "For 3 years I have been part of this family. I've attended every holiday, every celebration, every gathering. I've tried to be a good wife to Jake and a respectful daughter-in-law to Margaret and Charles, but today you all made it very clear that none of that mattered because I wasn't wealthy enough, wasn't sophisticated enough, wasn't good enough for your standards." The room was completely silent. Even the staff had stopped serving to listen. My father raised me to believe that a person's character matters more than their bank account. That kindness is more valuable than jewelry. That respect is earned through actions, not inherited through money. Today, you've all shown me exactly who you really are. Margaret tried to interrupt. "Angela, dear, there's been a misunderstanding." "No," I said firmly. "There's been no misunderstanding. You tried to throw me out of this wedding because you were embarrassed by me. You excluded me from family photos because I wasn't dressed expensively enough. You talked about me like I was some kind of charity case that Jake had mistakenly brought home." My father watched proudly as I continued. "I could have told you about my family's wealth years ago. I could have shown up to every event in designer clothes and expensive jewelry, but I chose not to because I wanted to see if you could accept me as I am. Today you gave me my answer." Jake stepped forward, finally finding some courage. "Angela, I'm so sorry. I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them." I looked at my husband, this man I had loved enough to give up everything for, and felt a mix of love and disappointment. "Yes, Jake. You should have. A husband's job is to protect his wife, not to stand by while his family humiliates her." Sophie, the bride, finally spoke up. "Angela, I owe you an apology. I let them treat you terribly on what should have been a day of celebration and family unity." At least Sophie had the grace to acknowledge what had happened. That meant something. My father placed his hand on my shoulder. "Angela, your jet is waiting if you'd like to leave. But the choice is yours." The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the embarrassing poor relation who needed to be hidden away. I was the daughter of one of the most successful men in America, and everyone in that room knew it. But you know what? The money didn't change how I felt about what had happened. It didn't erase the hurt or the humiliation. It just proved that these people only cared about wealth and status, not about character or kindness. I made a decision in that moment. "I forgive you," I said to the room, "all of you. But I want you to remember this day. I want you to remember that you judged someone based on their appearance, their clothes, their perceived social status. I want you to remember that you were willing to exclude and humiliate a family member because she didn't meet your financial expectations." Margaret was crying now, probably realizing how badly she had miscalculated. Charles looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "From now on," I continued, "things are going to be different. I will still live simply because that's who I choose to be. I will still shop at regular stores and drive a regular car because those things don't define my worth. But I will never again allow anyone in this family to treat me as less than equal." Jake took my hand. "You're right, Angela. About everything. I promise things will be different." My father smiled at Jake, but there was a warning in his eyes. "I trust they will be. My daughter deserves nothing less than complete respect and support from her husband and his family." The rest of the reception was awkward, to say the least. People kept approaching me with newfound interest, suddenly wanting to know about my life, my opinions, my plans. It was exactly the kind of attention I had been trying to avoid for years. But something good came out of that day, too. Jake and I had a long, honest conversation that night. He admitted that he had been embarrassed by his family's behavior, but hadn't known how to handle it. He promised to be stronger, to stand up for our marriage, to put our relationship first. Sophie called the next day to apologize again and to thank me for not letting my father's dramatic entrance ruin her wedding completely. We actually became closer after that day. Margaret and Charles took longer to come around, but eventually they learned to treat me with genuine respect. Not because of my father's money, but because they realized I wasn't going anywhere. The most important lesson I learned that day was about my own worth. I had spent 3 years trying to prove that I was good enough to be loved without my family's wealth. But the truth is, I was always good enough. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Money doesn't make you a better person. Designer clothes don't make you more worthy of respect. A fancy car doesn't make you more deserving of love. Character does. Kindness does. How you treat others when you think they have nothing to offer you. That's what defines who you really are. Today, Jake and I are stronger than ever. I still live simply because that's my choice, not because I have to. I still shop at regular stores and wear regular clothes because I like who I am in them. But I also know that if anyone ever tries to make me feel less than worthy again, I have the strength to stand up for myself. And sometimes, just sometimes, it doesn't hurt to have a billionaire father with a private jet ready to remind people that you should never judge a book by its cover. What an incredible transformation. Angela's story proves that true wealth isn't just about money. It's about character and self-respect. If this story inspired you, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. What would you have done in Angela's situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. Until next time, remember, never judge a book by its cover.